This isn't a story about me, but rather a friend of mine. About 2 years ago, things were going really well for me. The COVID lockdowns were over, and I was dating a lovely young doctor lady named Anna at the time. Thanks to those same lockdowns, it had been quite a while since the gang had all been together in person. So I decided to put on a bit of a house party after everything had settled down. It wasn't going to be a big affair, just a few close friends and maybe their partners. Some music, some nibbles, wine, just a great night in. So I reached out to people I knew over the next couple of weeks, and after a bit of finagling, something of an evening was coming together. Now, one of the people I invited was an old friend of mine, Tim. Now, Tim was a good guy, smart, always did really well at pub trivia. Tim and I happened to work in the same kind of niche industry, so we'd run across each other in jobs, as competitors, as colleagues, met at conferences, you name it. We kept in touch since we'd first crossed paths in the early days of our respective careers. But one thing you need to know about Tim, and this will be important later, was that Tim had a really, really hard home life growing up. Now, it normally took quite a while until you got close enough to him to learn any of this. Now, as an example, when we were younger, his own mother had once called his workplace to report him missing, even though he actually still lived with her at the time. Poor guy had been so embarrassed when the story spread around at work. And that was just one of the more tame stories I knew of. Make no mistake, this wasn't some kind of trolling between family members. Tim had been abused growing up. He cut ties with his mother many years ago and basically put himself through school and built a decent career by himself. Now, Tim had had relationships in the past, but the women he dated were few and far between, and we never saw him with the same one for very long. More often than not, he'd rock up to events solo. And on the night of the house party, that was the case. The house party went great. Plenty of conversation, laughs, and just general catching up on each other's lives since the last time we'd all seen each other in person. Now, after a few bottles of wine, the conversation turned to scary stories. Granted, I may have had something to do with steering the conversation that way, but I just never got over my childhood fascination with campfire ghost tales, even when sat in a comfortable living room with a glass of wine. We all swapped stories, and I heard the same old ones that I'd heard so many times before. At times someone saw floating, glowing eyes at night while driving alone in the desert. At times someone saw a person walk past them, only for the same person to walk past them, going the same direction a few seconds later. Now, when it came to Tim's turn, he hesitated a little. By that point in the evening, he had a bit to drink, and while not falling down drunk, he was definitely feeling it. I guess it was probably the combination of alcohol and the long COVID lockdowns that made him share a story none of us had ever heard before. I'll repeat his story as best I can remember him telling it. It's important you hear it in as close to his words as possible, to understand why I wish my friend really had been abducted by aliens as a child. I have a really distinct memory from when I was a little kid. I remember being in bed and being asleep, and then at some point in the night I remember waking up in this deep red light that was engulfing me. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, and I felt myself being lifted up in the air. I felt like I was up in the air for a few seconds, and then suddenly I dropped. I remember landing so hard that I actually bounced once on my bed. The red light vanished and I was just laying there. I don't really remember what happened after that. I think I was abducted by aliens as a child. The others gathered were really impressed by this story and started asking a few questions here and there. Even I was impressed by it. Tim wasn't the kind of guy to make things up, so that added this real air of credibility to his otherworldly story. With that being said, I took it to just be a story. Probably just a really vivid dream or something. The night continued on, and we all generally had a great time. But all good things must come to an end, and eventually people started to head home in ones and twos. At the end there was only 3 of us left: Anna, myself, and Tim. Tim had insisted on staying behind to help clean up a little while he waited for his Uber. As I was cleaning, I spotted Tim coughing a little in the living room. It was something he'd been doing on and off all night. and only after he'd assured us that it wasn't the Rona had we settled down. My girlfriend, being a doctor, did what she does and went over to ask him if he was okay. Not in any kind of serious way, just as a casual, "Hey, how's that cough?" They talked for a few minutes and I couldn't help but smirk when she finally got Mr. "I don't get sick so I don't go to doctors" to open his mouth and stick out his tongue while she peered inside. I nearly burst out laughing at this impromptu medical examination. I noticed a concerned look on Anna's face after she'd taken a look, and I swore I heard something along the lines of, "You should probably make an appointment with your GP." But I was feeling pretty tired by that point and paid it little mind. A little while after their impromptu doctor-patient consultation, Tim's Uber arrived, and with a manly half hug and a handshake, my friend was on his way home. Eventually I threw in the towel and just decided that whatever was left to clean could wait until morning, and after talking with Anna, she decided to stay the night. We went to bed after that, both of us too tired to do more than lay there. But as we lay there, I couldn't help but notice that she looked a little disturbed. It wasn't distress, per se, more like she was trying to remember something that was on the tip of her tongue. Whatever it was, I could see that she was struggling to sleep and still looked disturbed despite how tired she looked. After a while, I turned to her and asked what was bothering her. "Your friend, Tim, what do you make of his abduction story?" she asked. I was surprised that that was what she'd been chewing over in her mind so long. It was probably just a dream. I mean, he did say he was a child at the time. Anna chewed her lip and looked at me. "Didn't you say once that he'd grown up in a really bad home environment?" When I confirmed that yes, Tim had, her expression grew slightly more worried. When I asked her what she was thinking, she hesitated a few moments before answering. "He's got some scarring inside his throat. It's a pretty distinctive pattern and it's been there a long while, maybe since he was young." I was still confused. I thought back to the impromptu examination. "What are you thinking?" I asked. Anna studied me a moment before she replied. "Okay, hear me out. I want you to do something for me and we'll see if my hunch is right." Now, what Anna instructed me to do might seem a little kinky at first, but that wasn't the mood at all at that moment. You kind of had to be there to understand. Anna had me stand up next to the bed and lean over her while she lay on her back. She then had me place both my hands around her neck. Now, I was really uncomfortable about doing this, and I didn't apply any real pressure to her at all. Anna looked up at me from the bed. If I was a kid, it would be pretty easy to lift me up, especially someone your size. Miming the action like this really made it all hit home, and I think I got exactly what she was thinking. When I let go of her throat, and while I put almost no pressure on her whatsoever, for just a few seconds I could see faint red handprints on her neck where I'd held them. I soon lay back down in bed next to Anna. We were quiet for a long time, just sort of processing everything. Anna was the one to break the silence. "I don't think he was abducted. I think when he was a child, someone at home might have started to strangle him in his sleep. The red light he thinks he saw was probably just his brain suffering from a lack of oxygen. I think any adult could probably lift him up out of bed if they used their full strength. And I think they just chickened out before they could finish what they'd started." I remember laying there for several seconds and just not believing it. I was no doctor, but what she was saying suddenly seemed a whole lot more plausible to me than an alien abduction. As we lay there, I heard Anna ask, "Should we tell him?" But I had no idea. I still don't. It's been a while since that party, and I still think about that story and our theory every time I see Tim. I've never heard him tell that alien abduction story of his again, and deep down, I really do wish he had been abducted by aliens as a child.